P it stands for Phillips, and the S for sport, that's clear. The V is for Vereniging. What that means, I've no idea. Hello folks, and welcome to your Gersnet Preview Pod European Special, coming to you in association with Forest Precision Engineering. My name's Alec Anderson, and I'm speaking to you at lunchtime on Wednesday, the 30th of August, 2023, as the nerves kick in and the tension starts to build up ahead of tonight's massive Champions League playoff round second leg between Rangers and PSV of Eindhoven in the Philips Stadium, Eindhoven. Despite the fact I'm wearing an orange t-shirt and I've got a face like an old battered clog, I'm not in the Netherlands. I'm coming to you from this garage conversion in Glasgow that I get sent to every time I want to rant on about the football. I'm just a few yards from the garden in which I sat. I remember this time last year. I think it's 4 or 6 days earlier this time last year. We were also in this situation where Rangers were in Eindhoven. I was in Glasgow. Kickoff was approaching, and I remember sitting at the back with a wee cup of tea after having had an early dinner, and just looking at the wee patch of grass I've got, and then looking up at you can actually the beautiful view from my house. You can see the dump. You can see the local dump. I'm thinking I would rather be cutting grass, and I hate gardening, and taking it up to the dump than having to go in here and sit down and watch Rangers playing this match, because it meant so much. I've never been as nervous before a football match in my entire life. It just felt like this was the moment we had to do it, and it was every bit as difficult a task last year as it is tonight. And the fact that I don't feel that nervous, I'm still, it's the cloth is getting touched, but I'm still feeling like kind of half my life depends on it. Maybe I would end up maybe an amputation or something like that if we don't get through tonight, rather than my entire life depending on it. I'm still pretty nervous, but yeah, I'm not just as nervous, and I think that's a mood that's dangerous, and it's been reflected in various sections of the Rangers support, and I think it's also been echoed, if my memory serves me correctly, I don't know if I just imagined this, by Michael Beale himself. I'm sure somebody at Rangers officially was talking about how we'll not make that much more money if we go into the Champions League group stages than we would if we go into the Europa League. It's good that we can drop into the Europa League group stages if we lose tonight. That, to me, if you're not pushing forward, we should know this. 2012, such a recent memory for me. For most of us around about my age, you should know that if you're not pushing forward on all fronts all the time, you'll eventually start going backwards. And I feel we still need to get in. It's edging more towards we want this more than we need it tonight. Last season, this time last year, we definitely needed it. I'm going to say it again, 2012, the recovery from 2012. I know we want Rangers to be winning trebles and doing well in Europe at the same time. We want to be doing we're doing well on all fronts, as I'm talking about. But the practicalities behind that, being able to do that, all teams that win trebles usually base it on previous success. They've got a wee run of success going before they can eventually build up to the point where they can spread that success across a whole number of tournaments in any one season. So we have to get everything under our belt once. That's why I'm now obsessed with the League Cup. That's the only thing we haven't won since the traumas. I haven't won again since the traumas of 2012. Michael Beale finally wins the League Cup this season. Before I find out how he gets on in the League or the Scottish Cup, I'll just be getting a Michael Beale tattoo on the beer gut. He brought it home in Gothic font across the top of it. But last year it was the Champions League was the main thing. We'd even got to a European final, but we still hadn't played in the Champions League group stages again since before 2012. And when we were playing PSV this point last year in Eindhoven, I felt as if that was it. We'd had the chance under Gerrard, where we'd won the league in 2021, third qualifying round, we get done home and away by Malmo. Technically speaking, to win the Europa League, to reach the Europa League final itself, as we did later that season, was a chance to get straight in. To win that would have put us straight into the Champions League group stages for the following season. So technically that was a failure, although we'd other things. We'd lost a European final. We weren't concentrating on the kind of ancillary qualification benefits that we might get from lifting that trophy. It was about lifting the trophy. We'd failed to do that. But it meant, technically speaking, when we were playing PSV at this point last year, it was the third time in a year, really, that we've been trying to get into the Champions League group stages, and we did it. and it was absolutely immense. It's the most relieved I think I've ever been after a football match in my life. Despite the fact that you should be more relieved when you're beating minnows, when you're beating teams you're expected to beat. But this was just something that we had to do. And the build up this week to try and get a bit of light relief before I start talking you all into a depression. Rafael van der Vaart, he's been making the headlines over here. He's been catnip to the tabloids, and far be it from me to say that the Daily Record would translate a foreign quote in a way that would make it more sensational, that would make it more kind of incendiary to the Rangers support. But to any support, they just like to wind up everybody. But he did say something along the lines of he used to like Scottish football. I think that might have been the days where he would play for the Netherlands and they beat Scotland 6-0 in the second leg of a Euro 2004 playoff in Amsterdam. But he used to like Scottish football. He didn't like the way Rangers played, and he couldn't imagine in that first leg. He didn't like the way we played, and he couldn't imagine how PSV weren't going to progress. He couldn't imagine how Rangers were going to win. The imagination's a strange. I could never have imagined that Rafael van der Vaart, for example, was going to become a BDO darts player. I think he's been pretty rubbish, to be honest, but he did become a BDO darts player. That's quite a weird thing for a guy who played for Real Madrid and Spurs and Hamburg and what have you. But he couldn't imagine how Rangers were going to get through past PSV after that 2-week draw at Ibrox in the first leg, in which PSV had a lot of the ball, but we played really well. And I think part of the problem is he is Dutch, and the Dutch still can't imagine almost 50 years later how they lost the 1974 World Cup final to Germany, despite the fact that Germany scored more goals than they did in that final. They still kind of claim that they really want it. Spiritually they won it, morally they won it. And despite the whole, William of Orange association we have with that country, sometimes football people from that country can sound very like a certain club in the East End of Glasgow when it comes to accepting defeat. It's somebody else's fault, and somehow they still manage to win on a kind of moral level. And I love that. That's a real benefit to Rangers getting into this game tonight. If it doesn't go PSV's way in the early stages, there's a chance that the frustration, which we saw in big doses in that first game at Ibrox last Tuesday, the supporters giving Joey Veerman a hard time when he went to take a corner down at the away corner. Big Luke de Jong booked the door off its hinges at half time because they were losing the game on the night. They're unhappy, and they're made unhappy very easily and very quickly, especially when they assume that they're going to win this game. But Rafael van der Vaart just can't imagine it, and I think imagination's it's a funny thing, isn't it? Imagination is an ability to conceive of a scenario, a concept that hasn't yet occurred, that hasn't yet happened. So the thing about that is it happened a year ago, and Rafael van der Vaart is now 40 years old, I think. So he's getting to that age where the years fly in quickly, where life goes past you quick. So last year is kind of like last week to me. So it'll be much the same for him. And it's the same. It's PSV Eindhoven. They drew 2 weeks in the first leg last season at Ibrox, as they have this season, and then they lost 1-0 in Eindhoven. So for him to be unable to imagine something that has happened doesn't speak well of his imagination. They've even signed Malik Tillman, who is the guy who dispossessed Ramalho, the big Brazilian centre-half, who will be playing tonight and played last week and got dispossessed last week as well. And he squared the ball to Antonio Cholak to score the only goal of the game. So it's like all these signs. There's real massive elements of what happened last year. A scenario where Rangers beat PSV Eindhoven over the 2 legs of this tie, where they beat them in Eindhoven. It makes it really easy. You don't even have to imagine it. You just have to kind of look it up or even remember it. The other thing with imagination, I think, is sometimes imagination is about not letting the cynicism and actual experience, things that you do remember, not letting them get in the way of you envisioning, something kind of crazy, something kind of out there. I remember my 3-year-old nephew, I think he was 3 at the time, taking him over a bridge in Glasgow, and he's looking down at the water, and he said something about how the water moving made it actually feel like the bridge was moving and the water was staying still. And I remember thinking, that's absolutely amazing. And I deliberately forgot what it was he said because I didn't want to know for the rest of my life that anything I tried creatively, anything I tried to write had already been outdone by a toddler who grew up to be a Hibs fan as well. So I know sometimes you've just got to get rid of the cynicism and all the bad experiences you built up to let life, kind of let yourself imagine. And maybe what Rafael van der Vaart's done there is he's actually managed to forget the fact that PSV Eindhoven have never beaten Rangers in Eindhoven in 4 previous attempts. This is the 5th time we've played PSV Eindhoven in Europe. We've only beaten them at Ibrox once, but they have never beaten us in Eindhoven. So it's a real failure, either way you look at it, of Rafael van der Vaart's ability to imagine things. And for such a creative footballer, for a guy who played in a World Cup final, that's disturbing to know. Some people say his imagination, his brains are all on his feet. I think that's very much the case here. How are we going to do it tonight? What can I imagine of Rangers? How can I imagine Rangers are going to go at this? For me, it's all about the Lundstram-Jack conundrum. Are we going to go with 3 centre-halves, which John Lundstram looks like he would be the third because he's able to push forward and kind of impersonate Ryan Jack? It's not a straight swap for me, obviously. Jack for Lundstram. I would kind of rather, I just trust Ryan Jack more, but John Lundstram played well when he came on in place of Ryan Jack at the end of the first leg at Ibrox against PSV. He had a decent game, a really decent game at the weekend against Ross County. And more to the point, as I was rabbiting on about my post-match reaction on Saturday, Ross County, you can imagine them as a Dutch team because they're all so tall. The Dutch teams, it's the biggest, the tallest nation on earth, the Dutch. So anybody who plays in the Dutch league, no matter what country they're from, like I think Ibrahim Sangare, is he Ivorian? Phenomenal player. Sangare, the guy who scored the first goal against us last week and scored against us last season in Glasgow. That kind of size, he's a big unit, and he'll excel in that Dutch league because it's a league of big players. So you can imagine John Lundstram, because he's much bigger than Ryan Jack, so you can use him as a centre half and you can use him, to defend corners, because that's what we lost a second goal from last week. The big Luke de Jong. You can imagine John Lundstram getting the nod. The only other thing would be, and that would be the only change maybe to the team that we played last week, although against Eindhoven, the team we started with Ibrox against Eindhoven, although are we looking at the pace? Getting in behind them is also the thing we're going to have to do tonight. We're going to have to try and do it tonight. And I was saying to Rob that was the Ross County preview pod on Friday night, but we're also reviewing what happened in the first leg against PSV. I was talking to him about how we get in behind them and we managed to turn them, get the ball over the top of them. That was the way to do it. That was how we managed to get in. But we played like the away team. We played like the away team at Ibrox. So you always think if you go away from home, you're going to be more defensive than you were in the first leg. If the second leg's away from home, you feel you're going to be more defensive. But I don't know if you can afford to be any more defensive against this PSV team who, having played, was it a 4-2-3-1 against us at Ibrox, are almost certainly going to play the old classic Dutch 4-3-3 tonight. That's where they played against Sturm Graz in the first game in Eindhoven of their previous the third qualifying round when we were beating Servette. They were hammering Sturm Graz 4-1 in the first leg. They beat them 3-1 in the second leg in Austria. But they played this 4-3-3 with Johan Bakayoko on the right-hand side, Noah Lang on the left-hand side, and Luke de Jong in the middle, in between the two of them. They were having great fun. Lang's, it was a bit, Ryan Kent with Morelos in the middle kind of stuff. It was really impressive. They were really good. They had Isaac Badabi kind of left midfield, and at that time they had Patrick Van Aanholt, ex of Crystal Palace. He was going forward so offensively that he ended up costing him a goal because he tapped one over the line. Him tapping it over the line, he was in an offside position. But this is a left back. This was like Borna on speed. So he's touch and go tonight, but he didn't play at Ibrox. They managed to bring in what's the chap, Serginho Dest, who's ex-Ajax, ex-Milan, and they brought him in from Barcelona as a wee kind of last-minute replacement. So that's the financial level we're up against tonight. And they're really skillful and they're really offensive. I think they're going to pile it on, particularly as they seem to think that we're beyond, we're kind of beneath them. They should be blowing us away quite easily. Doesn't seem to quite happen though. But I feel as if, we could sit in a bit deeper, but it's kind of asking for it. We're probably going to go with a kind of 4-diamond 2 we did last week, and I think the question is it going to be Abdallah Sima, who kind of played in fits and starts in that first leg, but scored a sensational goal. Is it going to be him? I think we're all thinking it's going to be Dessers, who's the main striker, with Cantwell coming up. Is it at the top of the diamond, kind of coming up and supporting him, overlapping him, pulling the ball back to him, hopefully from the byline, as happened at points last week. Dessers, ex-Feyenoord. We've also got Danilo, ex-Feyenoord, and it's, these guys have played against PSV on a domestic level. They know the situation in the Netherlands. So perhaps he's going to go with the two of them up top. Is it going to be Rabbi Matondo? Because he's got that speed. When we get over the top and you turn them, when they have to play with their back to the goal, in particular, PSV were awful last week. We really benefited from that. And if they're expected to go forward relentlessly tonight, if we can stave off the pressure and get in behind them, there's gold to be had there. But I just don't know who we're going to play up front. I would personally maybe start with Matondo and have Dessers up there. Cantwell at the head of the diamond. I think he's probably going to go with Lundstrom at the base of that diamond as opposed to Ryan Jack. I think Cifuentes has done really well for us, particularly in Europe. He's come on the two. I think they learned a big lesson. You can see Rangers visibly learning a massive lesson in Servette, in Geneva, in that second leg where we played with Nico Raskin and Cifuentes, still really early in his Rangers career. Cifuentes kind of on the wings of that diamond, and they've learnt real lessons. But I think there's a temptation maybe to go with a kind of 5 diamond 1, almost perhaps Dessers up front in his own, or go with a faster striker than Dessers. He's not the quickest on his feet as the kind of lone striker, albeit we can't well supporting him. If you've got Lundstrom in there to come in and sit in between the two centre halves, and because PSV are such a wide team, they're piling down those wings. Bakayoko, Teza, doesn't come that far forward, Teza, and he's a right back. He's one of the worst players I've ever seen taking shies since Kirk Broadfoot, who'd played in the previous game at Ibrox. Remember Kirk Broadfoot, 2 full shies against Fiorentina in Florence in a total stalemate. Everything was depending on every move, a tactical masterclass, except we've got a guy who's taken 2 full shies in a European semi-final. It wasn't Taze who actually at one point just dropped the ball off the top of his head. It was another player. It might have been Badabi, I'm not sure. But yeah, they were terrible at taking shies. That was something I noticed. But Taze, obviously, he can get forward as well. Joey Veerman will probably go out on that right hand side with Sangare sitting in the middle. He's an immense player. Sangare, I would love to see him playing for Rangers. He's like a triple threat: the physicality, the mobility, the nous, the tactical reading of the game, and his finishing is pretty decent as well. And Bakayoko will pile in there. But I think in that respect, Beale might want to have Borna and Tav. Notice they're still kind of primary or one of our main offensive threats, and Tav obviously a goal scoring threat. Not just going forward for that, but to back up Cifuentes and Raskin and trying to shut them down and trying to shut PSV down on the wings to block them off. You remember particularly that the first goal they scored at Ibrox came from, it was a centre half going down their left, our right, and pinging one across to the back post. So we might do that to kind of shore things up with 3 centre halves, because we're going to have to work like hell on the wings just to stop them and also to get forward. I don't know, I am no tactical expert, as you can tell by the way I'm ranting on just now, but for me, I'm really interested in what happens between the thought of playing Lundstrom and Jack seems a bit too much defensively, but it might be the best way to go. But I would think if it's between the two of them, there's a good chance that John Lundstrom might get the nod tonight, and I'm not particularly happy with that if that's the case. I just love Ryan Jack. I just trust him. Maybe Rangers have decided they're going to go for it and just try and front up, but it's going to be a hell of an atmosphere. We know what it's like last season, where they were, shaking the bus outside the stadium and what have you, and that just helped Rangers. I think maybe there's the youth that guys of my age will still remember when the Dutch had a reputation for being the kind of chilled out nation of Europe. When it comes to the football, that seems to be where they get rid of all their anger. It's really a hell of an atmosphere. It's not as big as Ibrox, the Philips Stadium, but it's going to still be a hell of an atmosphere. Very aggressive atmosphere, very intimidating, and all the Grote Drie, the big 3 Dutch teams, Ajax, who always seem to hammer us, Feyenoord, who it's always touch and go with. It's almost like a draw between us and Feyenoord, and PSV, who, as I say, we always beat. The first European campaign I remember visually, I remember letting my aunt and uncle leaving to go and see us playing Young Boys Bern. And you think, Young Boys, that's a strange name for a football team, but it was 77, 78, 79. My dad getting me out of my bed. I was kind of 9 years old. and he got me out of my bed to see the highlights of Rangers beating Juventus. He knew the score, obviously, when we beat Juventus at Ibrox. Man, I'm getting me out of my bed on a school night. You need to come and watch this, watch the highlights in Sportsy. And I remember sitting at my gran's. It was Domino's night for my dad on a Thursday, and the game getting moved to a Thursday. We played Cologne in the quarter-final European Cup that season, and I remember watching that at my gran's, and that was a draw in the night, but they beat us over the two legs. The game it was postponed for 24 hours because of a huge snowfall. But the game in between, it didn't get my bed for that. Didn't get me out my bed. I didn't see that, and that was when we beat PSV Eindhoven. They were the UEFA Cup holders at that point. It was the first time we'd ever played them. They drew 0-0 at Ibrox. They scored in Eindhoven after a minute, and they'd never lost at home in Europe. But Rafael van der Vaart, we had the imagination because we'd won the Cup Winners' Cup just 6-7 years earlier. So we went out and just went back at them, and we equalised. PSV scored straight away. 2-1 up again, kind of contemptuous. We went back and we equalised again. Days of the way goal reel, Derek Johnston. And then we had Bobby Russell, the iconic Tommy McLean ball through to Bobby Russell. And I remember when Bobby Russell scored, because I think it was a Saturday. I don't think the highlights were on Sports Scene. It was like Sports Night or something. Highlights. It was recorded footage, kind of film almost from the Netherlands, which we didn't get to see until it was a Saturday on Football Focus or something. I actually saw the goals, and there was a huge range of support behind the goals to the right-hand side as the cameras look at it. It was the first time I'd noticed, and it's something that I've kind of grown up with now. It's become a feature of my life, the little paved area. It's like kind of little tiles almost in the gap between the front row of the stands behind each goal and the kind of boundary fence or the advertising hoardings. You always see the Feyenoord fans rushing forward. But at that point, it was Rangers fans. It wasn't plastic seats, it was benches. But the Philips Stadium's always been a kind of state-of-the-art stadium in the Netherlands, and the Rangers fans were rushing off these benches and rushing forward and jumping up and down, what have you, going crazy with the goals. And I always noticed, and it's still there. You can still see it, still got that little paved, kind of brick paving area between the front row of the stand, and the Rangers fans will be up in the pitch, and the Rangers fans will be up in the corner tonight in a different section altogether. But it's something, and it's become a beautiful thing for me because we went there in the Champions League in 99-2000. We beat them in Eindhoven. We hammered them 4-1 at Ibrox. We beat them. Michael Moles and Jorg Alberts combining beautifully in Eindhoven. We drew 0-0 2009, 2010, 2011 Europa League. And they beat us 1-0 at Ibrox in the second leg. But we still drew 0-0 over in Eindhoven. And of course, last year we had that game where Antonio Cholak scores the goal. Listen, folks, I'm just ranting and raving because it's so... I was in the Netherlands. This summer. I went to Rotterdam, stayed in Rotterdam for a week, and right across from Rotterdam Central Station was a beautiful building, and we got the train. There's a wee card there. We got the train, a wee day trip to The Hague. It was just a long, it's a bit, I don't know, was it 30 minutes, half an hour, I think, from Rotterdam. We went on a Saturday afternoon. Crazy place, The Hague, absolutely. That's a different story altogether. But I was walking around about The Hague and I saw a guy wearing a PAOK Salonika top. I took a photograph because Dick Advocaat at that point he's now resigned, but he was manager of Den Haag, back to his first love, his hometown. He was Den Haag manager in the summer still. And I remember Dick Advocaat, and one of his first European run as Rangers manager, we beat PAOK Salonika at Ibrox. I thought somehow to me that was a coincidence. And then PAOK Salonika are now playing at Tynecastle last week, which is where Dick Advocaat was the last Rangers manager to lose the first game of the season in the top flight. It's quite mental. For me, that was a coincidence. But getting the train back from Den Haag, it's an Eindhoven train. You get the train, I thought, I could just sit here. We just stayed in this train, went right through Rotterdam, carried on. We'd end up in Eindhoven. It's quite a small country, that was great. It's that kind of whole holiday sense of adventure, and here we are. Eindhoven came to Ibrox this year anyway. There's something kind of predestined about this. There's been a very much a kind of incestuous thing. The top end of the Champions League, you get these things where Patrice Evra has played for Manchester United, Juventus and Monaco in the Champions League final. Ronaldo scored for Man U and Real Madrid in the Champions League final. There's all these players who seem to just pop up for all the different kind of top Champions League teams. Well, we've got a kind of miniature version of that going on as we try to become a Champions League force again, or a Champions League presence even. And we had the fact it was Malmo were the team who put us out of the Champions League qualifiers in the third qualifying round in 2011, 2012 season, and then the next time I have a go at it in 2021, 2022 season, it's Malmo again, or the next team the very same round, and they put us out again. And we dropped under Ali back in 2011-12. We dropped into the Europa League playoffs, and it was Maribor. They put us out of that, and then when Steven Gerrard comes in and starts turning us round in European terms, Maribor's the first properly massive big win we have in his first season as manager. There's something really kind of weird going on, and the fact that it was Antonio Čolak that scored the 2 goals at Ibrox that put us out when he was playing for Malmo, so we just bought him. And in the following season, he scores against Union Saint-Gilloise in the same round for us, and then he's the man scoring the goal. He scored the home leg at Ibrox, but he also scores over there in the Netherlands. And to put them out, Abdallah Sima, he puts us out with Slavia Prague of the Europa League when Steven Gerrard was manager, and we get into the latter stages of the Europa League for the first time. So we bought him, and he scores against PSV Eindhoven last week. And of course, as I say, Malik Tillman, he's now at PSV, and that's the one thing I'm dreading. I personally, if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't fancy it tonight. That's my imagination. My imagination tends to protect me. It can imagine all the horrible scenarios and doesn't like to get too ahead of itself. As I say, we've only beaten PSV at Ibrox once, and we beat them 4-1. And I think it would be just like the thing if that was that kind of score that PSV registered in their only victory over Rangers in Eindhoven. But there's no technical reason I can find other than PSV's technical skill. But I think we had the measure of them in our own particular way last week at Ibrox, and there's a good chance if you could just wind them up, hang in there, I think they might lose it. There's every chance they'll lose it. This is massive for PSV. They lost to us at this stage last season. The season before that, they lost to Benfica at the same stage. They haven't been in the Champions League group stages since I think 2018 or something like that. So this is massive for them. There's pressure on them. For me, talking about imagination, I mean, 4 young boys for the Gaylord probably couldn't imagine when they formed a football team, they didn't have the money for a ball, the strips, whatever. They couldn't imagine that team would go on to win European trophies, be a founder member of the Champions League. As I was saying to Rob on the Ross County preview pod on Friday night, Rangers were in the very first Champions League 4-team group stages, and I would love us to be in the last Champions League 4-team group stages. The system in the Champions League is going to change to some stupid setup next season, so I would like us to be in the last proper. But PSV were also in that first ever Champions League group stage. You can see from the video behind me, so they'll be wanting it just as badly for that very reason. I feel as if we can do this. I don't think we're going to. But then you get Walter Benitez, that goalkeeper for PSV. He threw the ball in the back of the net at Ibrox last season. Say Ramallo, he's got a big mistake in him, and we know that Luc de Jong and the whole PSV team have got a bit of a temper. Get in there, Rangers, wind them up, want it, need it, and get us into that Champions League group stage. Celtic are guaranteed to go into the Champions League group stage for the 12th time in their history this season, and they've done it in the back of our coin. They've done it on our coin, they've done it in the back of our efforts to a large part, and that pisses me off, if I'm being quite honest with you. This would be the 12th time that Rangers have qualified for the group stages if we're to do the business tonight. And that's amazing when you consider the free access, the free run Celtic have had at Europe the whole time. We were in the lower divisions and hadn't got our act together yet again. So it's really amazing. And one of the things is, if we only qualified directly for the group stages twice, 9 times in our history, and I don't know if there's any British team have done better than this when it comes to qualifying for the Champions League group stages, actually getting through qualifiers, getting through this round in particular. From the very first season, you can see the pennant behind me, where we beat Leeds at this round, at this stage. Beat Leeds United, the champions of England, home and away, taking us through Parma, a couple of times against Arnauthis Famagusta. Sometimes you get an easier draw. Red Star Belgrade, then last season beating PSV Eindhoven. There's probably few teams in Europe, never mind a few teams in Britain, who've got the kind of nous and the ability and the know-how to get through this stage of Champions League qualifying, the penultimate stage, and I just hope we can go and do it again tonight, because for me, it's all about Europe, and it's all about being at the big table. That's where Rangers deserve to be, because last season I think it was we're imagining again this season that it's going to be a strain on our determination to win the title, to win the league again. Whereas the thing is, last season we had the World Cup in the middle of it. the Champions League was played in this kind of much more, I think it was over like a 8-week period almost. It was 2 months anyway, whereas this season it'll be 3 months. There's no World Cup being shoved into the middle of the season that's going to push things together. Last season it was a perfect storm of Rangers at a kind of financial time in their history where it was this, we were really stretching ourselves to be in the Champions League group stages, and we get hit by the most kind of intense Champions League group stages ever. I want to go back in and just rectify what happened to us in last season's group stages. And I say it's going to be spread over 3 months this year. It's going to be back to the usual kind of couple of week or a 3-week break between games as opposed to 2 weeks and a week as it was last season. We can do this, Rangers. I'd love you to do it. And we'll be back with a bit of post-match reaction to find out if we have done it.